The storm had rolled past, leaving the prairie soaked and the cattle staggering on their last breath. Yet what Silas found lying out in his yard made no earthly sense. Two Apache women lay sprawled in the mud, both unconscious, both built like giants. Even flat on the ground, they were towering figures, broad-shouldered and fierce in stature. The smaller one, if you could call her that, still stood well over 6 feet when upright, her body hardened by a life of battle and survival. The taller sister was something out of campfire tales, nearly 7 feet of muscle and bone, her frame broader than Silas's cabin doorway. Whispers had always painted such women as legends, daughters of chiefs, trained as warriors, born to guard their bloodlines. They never wandered alone. They never showed up wounded at some rancher's failing spread without war parties close behind. Their beadwork shimmered with wealth worth more than Silas's entire place, though now it was torn and blood-stained. The shorter one bled badly from her side, her breathing ragged. The taller one had a gash across her brow, but her dark eyes, though clouded with pain, burned with sharp awareness. Every instinct Silas had screamed at him to walk away. Out here, a settler caught helping Apache could wind up hanging from the nearest cottonwood. But when the taller woman's gaze locked on him, he didn't see fury or hatred. He saw raw human fear. The same fear he felt every time he watched his cattle die off and knew he couldn't stop it. Her lips moved, her deep voice cracking out a single broken word before she slipped back into darkness. Silas stood frozen over the giants, heart pounding. One choice, made in 3 minutes, would mark him either as the biggest fool this frontier ever saw, or as a man braver than he ever believed. He knelt beside them, hands trembling as he checked their wounds. The smaller woman's ribs had been torn open by something sharp, blood soaking into the dirt beneath her. She had maybe an hour left. The taller giant's wound bled freely, but her eyes tracked him, sharp and dangerous, as if reminding him she could snap his neck if she wanted. 15 miles from the nearest ranch, 40 from town, Silas knew what he risked. Helping them meant death if word got out. Men had been lynched for less, called collaborators traitors. Still, when the taller woman rasped in rough English, "Please, help, sister," the word cut Silas to the core. He thought of June, the sister he'd buried 3 winters back. The ache of that loss was still raw. Thunder rolled again. Another storm closing in. If he let these women die, folks would assume he killed them defending his land. That lie could even win him respect in town. But staring into her weathered face, high cheekbones, dark eyes holding not a hint of begging, only the grim acceptance of death, Silas felt something snap deep in his chest. "This ain't Apache or settler," he muttered under his breath. "This is just 2 human souls bleeding out while I weigh the cost of mine. Damn it." He slipped his arms under the smaller woman's shoulders. She was heavier than any steer he'd ever carried, solid muscle beneath ruined cloth. The taller sister staggered to her feet, swaying but determined, gripping her siblings' legs as they hauled her toward the cabin. Each step felt like walking to the gallows. The cabin doorframe was too narrow. They had to turn her sideways, easing her bulk through without tearing the wound further. The wind carried more than rain now, dust clouds rising from the southern ridge. "Riders. They're coming," the taller one whispered, tightening her hold on her sister's legs. Through a crack in the shutter, Silas spotted them. 5 Apache warriors on horseback, painted for war, rifles across their backs. They sat motionless, scanning the valley like wolves on a hunt. "Your sister?" Silas asked in a low voice. "Why are they after her?" The woman pressed cloth against her sister's wound, jaw hard. "Willow refused marriage. Chief's son wanted her. She said no." The simplicity of it hit Silas like a hammer. A woman saying no, now both sisters hunted for it. His mind flashed to his own freedom, the right to walk away from anything he didn't want. These women had no such choice. Outside, the lead warrior lifted his hand, signaling toward Silas's cabin. They'd found the blood trail. "How many rounds you got?" the giant woman asked, calm as stone, knife steady in her hand. Silas counted. 12 for the rifle. 6 in his pistol. Not enough. Not against 5 seasoned fighters who knew this land better than him. Willow stirred then, eyes glassy with fever, whispering fast in Apache. Her sister's face darkened at the words. "What did she say?" Silas pressed. The tall one's gaze shifted back to him, slow and grave. "These men, not here for us. They came for you." Silas's blood ran cold. He'd never stolen from the Apache, never lifted a hand against them. His ranch was on land he'd paid for fair and square, though he knew that meant little to those who lived here long before. "Why me?" he whispered. She studied him, weighing his soul through his eyes. Then she spoke, 3 moons ago, white man found a girl by the river. Near dead. He left food, medicine, no name. You remember? And then it hit him. The fever-stricken girl he'd pulled from a creek months back, barely 14, half drowned. He'd nursed her until she could stand, guided her toward Apache lands, then rode away without a word. She was the chief's daughter, Raven said softly. Ironwood swore a blood debt to the man who saved her. Some warriors doubt her tale. They come to see if it's true. Outside, the hoofbeats grew louder. The warriors began their descent, patient as hunters closing in on trapped prey. The drum of hooves rolled closer, a low thunder over the prairie. Silas felt a cold dread slide down his spine. This wasn't about the 2 giant sisters he'd just risked his life to shelter. This was about a debt he hadn't even known he owed. A life saved months ago was coming back to collect, and he had no idea what the price would be. The horses stopped right outside his door. A voice barked in Apache, sharp and commanding. Raven's hand shot out and gripped Silas's arm, her fingers strong and warm against his skin. "What you choose next," she whispered, voice low as a rattler in dry grass, "decides if you live as a friend or die as an enemy." The door shuddered under a heavy fist. This time the shout came in English, "White man, we know you're inside. Come out now." Silas's knuckles whitened around his rifle. Beside him, Raven helped Willow sit up against the wall. Willow was pale but steady, her dark eyes locked on the door with grim resolve. "If I go out, they might shoot me," Silas muttered. "If I stay inside, they'll burn us all out." "No burn," Raven answered firmly. "They test your courage, not start a war. It's the Apache way." A second voice joined the first outside, younger and meaner. "You shelter women who defy Chief Ironwood's son. That makes you our enemy." Silas saw the trap clear as day. Admit he'd helped Raven and Willow, and he was taking a stand against Cade. Deny it, and he was lying to men who already smelled the truth. Either path pointed to the same grave. Then Raven said the words that flipped everything, "Tell them the truth about Ella. Tell them your name." She was telling him to claim the blood debt, to stake his life on the word of a 14-year-old girl and bet that her father prized honor over politics. The pounding on the door grew harder. Through the window, Silas glimpsed 2 warriors moving toward his barn where his horses were kept. They were running out of time. "My name is Silas," he called out, voice carrying farther than he'd expected. 3 moons back, I pulled Chief Ironwood's daughter from the creek and brought her home alive." Silence fell outside. Even the wind held its breath. When the voice came again, it was older now, steadier, like a canyon echo. "Show yourself, Silas. Bring the women." Raven gave him a small nod and helped Willow to her feet. Willow swayed but stayed upright, one hand pressed against her bandaged ribs. Together the 3 of them moved toward the door. Silas lifted the wooden bar and swung it open. 5 Apache warriors sat their horses in the yard, paint slashed sharp across their faces. But now, under the rising moonlight, Silas saw something else in their eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even respect. The leader, a man with gray streaking through his black hair, studied Silas with a hard curiosity. "You are smaller than my daughter described," the warrior said at last. "She said the white man was a giant who fought river spirits." Despite everything, Silas almost smiled. Children always make stories bigger. "I'm just a rancher. Found her tangled in branches. Helped her get free." The leader's gaze slid to Raven and Willow. "These women brought shame to Chief Ironwood's son. Why do you help them?" The question hung like smoke over a campfire. Silas felt the weight of 3 lives balanced on his next breath. The other warriors waited, hands loose on their rifles. "Because they needed help," he said simply. "Same reason I helped your chief's daughter." The gray-haired warrior stared at him for a long, long moment, then turned his horse toward the others. They spoke quickly in Apache, voices low but urgent. When they finished, the leader looked back at Silas with something close to approval. "Chief Ironwood comes at sunrise," he announced. "He will decide if the blood debt covers these women's defiance. You will wait." The longest night of Silas's life stretched ahead like a noose waiting for dawn. After the warriors melted into the dark, he helped Raven change Willow's bandages by lamplight. The bleeding had stopped, but infection was still a real threat. The torn flesh along her ribs looked angry and swollen, though she never complained. "Will he kill me?" Silas asked quietly, watching Raven's practiced hands. "Chief Ironwood is a fair man," she replied, not meeting his eyes. "But his son has many friends among the warriors. They say marriage to Willow would bring peace between clans." She paused, tightening a knot. "Peace is worth more than one white man's life." The brutal honesty struck harder than any threat. Silas understood politics. He'd seen how quickly alliances shifted when survival was on the line. His death might be the price of tribal harmony. "Why did she refuse?" he asked, nodding toward Willow, who dozed against the wall. Raven's expression hardened. "Kate has taken 3 wives already. Beat 2 until they lost their babies. Willow saw what happens to women who cannot say no." She met Silas's eyes directly. "Some things are worse than death." They worked in silence after that, the weight of morning pressing down like storm clouds. Outside, coyotes cried across the valley, their voices sharp with hunger. Silas counted the hours, wondering if he'd live to hear them again. Near midnight, Willow stirred awake, her fever broken. She spoke softly to Raven in Apache, then turned to Silas with clear, intelligent eyes. "Thank you," she said in careful English, "for helping when help brings danger." "Anyone would have done the same," Silas replied. The sisters traded a look that said otherwise. "White men have helped Apache before," Willow continued slowly, "but never risked life for women who bring trouble. You're different." Raven stood, moving to the window to check the horizon. "Different," she murmured. "Maybe why you're still alive when Chief comes. Maybe why he listened to Ella's words about the rivermen. Or maybe why he'll kill me quick instead of slow," Silas said, trying for humor but hearing the fear in his own voice. Raven turned back. In the lamplight, something flickered in her expression that made his breath catch. Not pity or gratitude but recognition, as if she saw something in him he didn't yet see in himself. "It's me and Willow," she said softly. "We're watching you tonight, how you move, how you think, how you choose." She stepped closer, close enough for Silas to smell sage in her hair and see the strength in her dark eyes. "You're not like other white men we know." The words hung between them, heavy with danger and possibility. Heat rose in Silas's chest, an attraction he had no right to feel. Then a sound outside froze them all. Horses moving slow and steady through the darkness. Too early for ironwood, too late for friendly callers. Raven pressed to the window, body taut as a drawn bow. 3 riders, she whispered. "Not Apache. White men with badges." Silas's stomach turned to ice. If settlers had found the giant sisters in his cabin, the sunrise with Chief Ironwood would be the least of his worries. Outside, a familiar voice called through the night. "Silas, we know you're in there. Come out slow, hands where we can see 'em." Marshal Briggs stepped into the lamplight, his badge catching the glow like a threat. 2 other lawmen fanned out across Silas's yard, their hands resting on their gun belts with practiced ease. "Silas," Briggs called, his voice heavy with federal authority. "We've got reports of Apache in this area. Tracking party says they headed this way after hitting the Dawson place." Silas's blood ran cold. If Dawson's ranch had been attacked, settlers would be howling for Apache blood. Any Apache caught would be shot on sight, no questions asked. Behind him, he sensed Raven's massive frame tensing in the doorway, nearly 7 feet of trained warrior ready to fight if needed. Even wounded, she was more dangerous than all 3 lawmen combined. Willow stayed motionless against the wall, but her giant form coiled with barely contained power despite her injuries. "Haven't seen any Apache," Silas said, stepping outside and pulling the door closed behind him. His body felt small and inadequate, blocking the entrance. Knowing 2 women capable of crushing these men with their bare hands waited inside, he saw Briggs's eyes narrow with suspicion. "That so? Because there's blood on your porch, Silas. Fresh blood and a lot of it." He gestured to one of his men, who crouched to examine the dark stains in the dirt. "Cut myself chopping wood," Silas said smoothly. Silas lied without blinking. "Axe slipped on wetwood, caught my arm." "Show me the cut," Briggs demanded. Silas's mind kicked hard. He could fake it, slice his forearm, let it bleed fresh. But Briggs wasn't green. A federal marshal could tell old blood from new, truth from a quick knife job. "Deputy," called the man crouched over the porch stains. "This ain't from one person. Different spray, different pooling. And these prints," he pointed at the mud, "they're huge. Bigger than any settler I've seen." Briggs's eyes narrowed at the massive tracks that could only belong to the giant sisters. "What kind of company you keeping, Silas?" "Don't know what you mean," Silas answered, sweat beading at his hairline. Briggs drew his pistol. "Step away from the door. We're searching the place." "You got a warrant?" Silas asked, knowing it didn't mean much this far from town. Out here, federal badges wrote their own rules, especially when they were hunting Apache. "Don't need one for Indian killers," Briggs said coldly. "Stand aside." Silas knew he had seconds before they found Raven and Willow. Then all 3 were done, 2 for being Apache, 1 for harboring enemies of the territory. As Briggs moved for the latch, Silas made a desperate call. "Wait," he said. "You're right. There are Apache here. 2 women badly hurt. They came for help." Briggs swung the gun to Silas's chest. "You admit to harboring hostiles?" "I admit to helping 2 dying human beings," Silas said, steady. "Same as I would anyone." The marshal's lip curled. "Apache sympathizer. You'll hang for this, Silas." Behind the door, Silas caught the faint shift of weight, the giant sisters readying for a fight. Before it could break loose, a shout came from the ridge. "Marshal! Riders from the north, can't tell how many." Briggs snapped toward the sound, momentarily forgetting Silas. Hoofbeats rolled closer, steady and gathering. "Could be more Apache," he muttered, then barked to his men, "Defensive positions. We settle with Silas after we see who's coming." As the lawmen scattered for cover, Silas understood help, or ruin, was galloping out of the dark. The hoof thunder swelled, heavy with the kind of judgment that shows up with daylight. The riders who broke from the night weren't Apache. More federal agents backup Briggs had called in. "Marshal Briggs," the lead rider called, swinging down fast. "Orders from the territorial governor. Any Apache harbored by settlers are to be brought in for questioning about the Dawson killings." With muscle at his back, Briggs's confidence surged. 6 armed lawmen now ringed Silas's place. Resistance would be suicide. "Search every building," Briggs ordered. "Drag out anyone you find." Silas's heart slammed. His confession had doomed them. In minutes, Raven and Willow would be hauled into the yard. Alive if lucky, dead if not. But Raven stepped out on her own, filling the doorway before the lamplight washed over her. Even seasoned marshals flinched. None had seen a woman like her, nearly 7 feet, bearing like royalty, moving with lethal grace despite her wounds. "I am Raven, daughter of Chief Ironwood," she said in clear English. "This man saved my sister's life when she was dying. Apache law shields those who show mercy to our people." Willow followed, tall and corded with muscle, drawing nervous glances. These were no ordinary women. Giants among their own, warriors who could kill with their hands. Briggs lifted his rifle toward their chests. "Apache law means nothing to federal marshals. You're coming with us." "No," Raven answered, voice deep and absolute. "We are not." "You don't have a choice," Briggs shot back, but doubt crept into his tone. Their comms said they knew a rulebook he didn't. Raven's smile went cold, so like ironwood that Silas felt it in his bones. "My father arrives at sunrise. He will speak for us. Until then we stand under the protection of a blood debt owed to this man." "What blood debt?" Briggs snapped. Willow stepped forward, her shadow swallowing the yard. 3 moons ago, a white rancher saved the chief's youngest daughter from drowning. Apache law commands that a life debt be honored. This man called that debt tonight when he helped us. The marshals traded looks. They'd heard stories of sacred debts, obligations even war parties respected. But a white settler claiming that shield? That was new. "That's Indian superstition," Briggs said, though his voice thinned. "Federal law overrides tribal custom." "Does it?" Raven asked softly. "Then explain the treaty the territorial governor signed last winter, recognizing Apache legal customs in matters involving our people." Color drained from Briggs's face. The treaty was real, inked to keep the territory from exploding. If these women were truly Ironwood's daughters, and if Silas could prove he'd saved another, federal law would have to honor the debt until the chief ruled. "We'll wait till morning," Briggs said at last. "But if your father doesn't show, or if his judgment doesn't meet federal standards, you 3 are coming with us." While the marshals set a tight perimeter, Silas understood that everything now hinged on Ironwood's word at dawn. The sisters had bought a single night. Morning would bring a verdict that could save them, or break them. Raven stepped close, her presence both shield and anchor. "My father is a wise man," she murmured. "But wisdom sometimes chooses the harder path." Staring at the rifles glinting around his land, Silas knew Ironwood's choice wouldn't just decide their fate. It could set the ground rules for every collision between Apache law and federal power on this frontier. Through the long, grinding hours, they could do nothing but hold fast and pray wisdom outweighed politics. Judgment finally rode in with the sunrise, hooves drumming exactly when Raven said they would. Silas stood in the doorway, hollow from a sleepless night of watching federal men pace his yard. The giant sisters kept their vigil beside him, their towering forms both warning and promise. Briggs stepped from behind a crude barricade, rifle ready, as dust boiled on the northern horizon. "That better be your chief," he called to Raven. If it's a war party, we start shooting. Raven straightened to her full height, casting a long morning shadow. My father comes as promised. He will speak Apache law and federal law. The riders resolved from the dust. Not a war band, but ironwood with 5 elders, faces painted for ceremony. They approached slowly, each movement crafted to honor both tradition and the armed men watching them. Ironwood dismounted with the easy authority of a man born to command. Older than Silas expected, maybe 50 winters, but lean and unbowed. His eyes were the thing, sharp, calculating, utterly unimpressed by the rifles hemming him in. Marshal Briggs, the chief said in perfect English, somehow knowing the man's name. You hold my daughters as prisoners. This births a problem between our peoples. Briggs stepped forward, badge catching the morning light. Your daughters murdered settlers at the Dawson place. They're wanted for questioning under federal law. Dawson tried to force himself on my daughters, Ironwood replied, voice like flint. They defended their honor. Apache law justifies their actions. The federal treaty recognizes Apache law in matters concerning tribal members. The standoff turned into a duel of words. Silas stood silent as 2 seasoned men fenced with law instead of lead. Every phrase was a blade, every pause a parry. Even if that's true, Marshal Briggs pressed, harboring fugitives is still a federal crime. This rancher broke the law helping them. Chief Ironwood shifted his gaze to Silas, eyes sharp enough to cut. You're Silas. 3 moons passed, you saved my youngest Ella from drowning in the creek. Yes, sir, Silas said, his voice tight under the weight of every stare fixed on him. Apache law says I owe you a blood debt, life for life, Ironwood declared, his tone carrying like a drumbeat across the yard. But you also saved 2 more of my daughters when they were near death. That makes this debt complicated. Raven stepped closer, her towering frame steady as a wall at Silas's side. Chief, she said formally, this man risked everything to help us. He has earned Apache respect. Ironwood studied Silas for a moment, then reached into his saddlebag. When his hand emerged, it held a necklace of carved bone and silver, the kind only the highest bloodlines wore. The crowd went still. 3 lives saved creates an obligation beyond simple debt, the chief announced. His voice rolled with the authority of tribal law. Silas, you have proven yourself worthy of adoption into the Apache family. You become my son, by deed, by honor. Briggs's rifle trembled in his hands. You can't just declare American land as Apache land. The federal government won't allow it. Ironwood cut him off with a calm blade of words. The treaty says Apache can adopt outsiders, claim them as kin. Your own law protects adopted Apache family from persecution. The brilliance of it struck Silas like lightning. With one stroke, Ironwood shielded his daughters, gave Silas legal protection, and even carved out a claim to the ranch under treaty law. Silas, Ironwood continued, do you accept adoption? Do you take my daughters as your sisters, my people as your people? Silas looked at Raven and Willow, 2 giants who had staked their lives on his choices. This wasn't just protection, it was belonging, a chance to bridge 2 worlds divided by war. I accept, he said, his voice ringing clear. Ironwood stepped forward and hung the necklace around Silas's neck. The weight felt like both chains and wings. Briggs holstered his weapon with visible frustration, beaten clean in front of all. This isn't over, he spat. There will be federal investigations. Let them come, Ironwood replied with steady confidence. Apache law is clear. Federal treaty honors Apache law. My son and my daughters are under our protection now. As the chief prepared to leave with his elders, he turned back, his ancient eyes glinting with something close to humor. Son, he said quietly, tomorrow I return with a different decision. Tonight, think hard on what adoption truly means. The following day, Ironwood returned with the verdict that would shake Silas's world forever. Silas stood in his yard, the adoption necklace still heavy on his chest. He hadn't stopped thinking on the chief's warning. Beside him, Raven loomed in her 7-foot glory, her shadow stretching long across the ground as her father approached with his circle of elders. Months since the adoption had transformed everything. Silas's dying ranch now thrived as a trading post where Apache and settlers exchanged goods under treaty protection. Willow's sharp mind for trade made the place prosper, while Raven's strength turned weeks of back-breaking labor into a day's work. But prosperity brought trouble of its own. Each day alongside Raven, watching her move with deadly grace, feeling the wisdom in her dark eyes, had torn at him. She was his sister now under Apache law, a bond guarded by penalties as harsh as death. Yet his heart pulled in ways he couldn't deny. You wrestle with adoption, Willow had said just yesterday, her 6.5-foot frame giving even her casual words the weight of judgment. Law protects family, but sometimes protections become prisons. As Ironwood dismounted with ceremonial calm, Silas wondered if the old man had sensed the impossible knot he'd tied. "My son," Ironwood began, his voice carrying authority sharpened by age. "You have honored adoption well. My people see your worth, your protection of those who needed shelter. But I am an old man. And sometimes old men fix one problem only to create another." Silas's heart pounded as Ironwood's sharp gaze shifted between him and Raven. "When I made you brother to my daughters," the chief continued, "I solved the law's problem, but I created a problem of the heart." He gestured toward Raven, towering beside Silas. "She is a warrior born to lead. But she is also a woman who chooses her own path. Apache law honors such choice." Raven stepped forward, her height making even Ironwood seem small. "Chief," she said with dignity, "I choose to speak." "Then speak, daughter," Ironwood replied. Raven's deep voice rang out clear as a church bell. "This man has shown more honor than any white man I have known. His heart is true, his courage proven. But my heart sees him not as brother, but as a man worthy of another bond." Ironwood smiled faintly, the same cunning expression that had rattled federal marshals. "Apache law has answer for this. A brother who proves worthy can be released from family bond by chief's word, if other family agrees." He turned to Willow. "Daughter, what say you?" Willow rose to her full height, voice steady. "I release Silas from brotherhood. He has earned the right to choose his own path." Her grin spread wide, joy softening her imposing features. "And my sister has waited long enough for happiness." "Then I give final word," Ironwood declared. His voice thundered like judgment itself. "Silas is no longer my son by adoption. But if he chooses, he may become my son by marriage, if my giant daughter accepts him." The wedding that followed was unlike anything the frontier had seen. Apache traditions and territorial law blended into one ceremony, binding them in both worlds. Federal officials, still bitter from their earlier defeat, could only watch as Silas married into one of the most powerful Apache families. Willow stood witness, her laughter carrying across the valley as Raven's joy lit the day. Nearly 7 feet tall in traditional dress, Raven was a vision, beautiful and formidable, choosing love over duty. The trading post flourished beyond imagination. The sight of the two giant sisters working beside their new brother-in-law became legend. Settlers rode from hundreds of miles to see them. Women taller than most men, strong enough to outwork 3 at once. Federal probes vanished when Washington realized peace with the Apache brought more value than bloodshed. What had once been a failing ranch became the foundation of a new kind of frontier, where strength was used to build instead of destroy. Chief Ironwood's shocking decision was clear now, not just adopting a white settler, but crafting a move of legal genius that freed his daughter to marry for love while keeping tribal honor intact. 6 months later, Silas stood watching his towering wife direct work on their expanding home. And he knew the truth. Life's greatest blessings often come disguised as impossible trials. The sisters had given him not only love and prosperity, but a place in a world larger than he'd ever dreamed.